Now that Elizabeth Warren is out of the race, who might her supporters eventually shift towards?
We have Will Joando and Inez Stepman back with us to talk about second choice here. Great to have you both.
Good to be here.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about second choice because, look, when Amy and Pete endorsed Biden, it looked like all their supporters jumped on. And so I kind of assumed, I think most of the media assumed, that with Michael Bloomberg, let's start there, and then we'll talk about Elizabeth Warren. When he endorsed Biden, I kind of thought it would be the same thing, right? It makes some sense. Yeah. Moderates, et cetera. They combine forces. They're all going to come over. However, some of the polling that we've gotten post Super Tuesday, post Bloomberg endorsement has made me question that. So let's put up first national poll, Reuters Ipsos, national poll of voters, which finds that Biden in a head-to-head against Bernie Sanders is at 55% and Sanders is at 45%. Now, frankly, I was expecting that to be a lot broader range. And if Bloomberg supporters had, in fact, consolidated behind Biden, you would see a much broader range. There's also a poll out of Missouri that found, again, that's a race where I thought, okay, Biden's going to open up a big lead on Bernie Sanders now that it's head-to-head. And in fact, it's quite narrow. Mm-hmm. You can see 48-44. Again, this is post-Super Tuesday. So Bernie's still very much in the fight in a state like Missouri, Inez, which I found surprising. So it made me think, it made me question that initial assumption I had. And if you think about who a Bloomberg supporter is, first of all, it's someone who looked at Joe Biden and was like, there's a problem there, right? I need to go for someone else. And second of all, maybe someone who doesn't, look, Bloomberg was a Republican, who maybe doesn't love the Democratic Party. And so at least some portion of them sees something appealing in Bernie Sanders' critique of the Democratic Party.
So I'm not sure I agree with the second part, but I actually think there's a simpler explanation, which is Bloomberg built a not real, a soft core of poll support based on a huge amount of advertising, right? And we saw in Super Tuesday how that didn't translate into actual votes. I would, for the same reasons, not expect that block that was in the polls to move in any kind of uniform ideological way, because a lot of those people were checking his name on polls because they'd seen 20 ads with Mike Bloomberg in it.
And so it's not like he doesn't have control of this group of voters the way that there was a real loyalty to Pete. There was a real loyalty to Amy.
Right, with Peter and Amy, people had seen them in a number of debates.
They really bought into their campaign.
Actually bought into what the candidate. I don't think that's the case with Mike Bloomberg.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
You can't really buy yourself that kind of support.
And things with Bloomberg's endorsement, Will, it really was more about his organization and the money than the support that he brought to Biden. And this is the interesting thing, though, and this gets to Crystal's point, which is that I'm not sure how much control, maybe Warren. So with Warren in her second choice, it's actually pretty much split, according to Morning Consult. More Bernie than Biden, but
43,
not necessarily
43-36,
which is, pretty actually close.
It's consistent with what we've seen.
It is consistent. And so I'm not sure if I think if she were to endorse, I'm not sure yet whether she would have the same pull over her voters towards Bernie or Biden as maybe Pete Buttigieg or an Amy Klobuchar. What do you think?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, you had Pete was trying for, and to some extent got, like a young cultish kind of following of this is what we need. And I think those folks, and ideologically with Biden and with Amy, I think that's right. Your point on Bloomberg is exactly right. I think you can't be in the race for 2 months and not have anyone give you a dime, which is an actual big act. When people give to you,
and they buy into your movement.
You buy into it, and he didn't have that. So it was very soft. And I agree with you. If you look at those numbers, which have been consistent throughout the campaign, even though most people would think because of the policies, Elizabeth and Bernie have the same supporters, they don't, and there's a lot of overlap there. So I think it's going to be a wash.
It's a lot more complicated. I actually think that if she were to endorse, which I'm skeptical, my guess most likely is she just doesn't endorse anyone. I think that's the most likely scenario. I think if she did endorse one or the other, her people really do love her. They really do believe in her. There really was energy there for her at her rallies and among her supporters. Obviously, it wasn't enough to do very well in the primary, but they are a committed group. I think if she endorsed, it would sway people to one side or the other, is my guess, Inez.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I mean, look, her supporters, and there's a reason that it's not overwhelmingly for Bernie, right? Her supporters are sort of white, affluent liberals and the New York Times, right? So, but I do think you're right. She has a certain pull over her supporters. I think if she were to endorse Bernie, it would make some of those people a little more comfortable with Bernie in a way that they're not comfortable with Bernie now. I think that she'll probably just pull the female victimhood card the way that she's pulled it both throughout her campaign and at its end, and just say, oh, I can't endorse either one of these guys. It's so sad that there's not a woman, running for president this round. That's why I can't endorse. That's my prediction for Elizabeth
I'm laughing
Warren.
because you're totally right. I totally
or she takes the view that Obama has taken to, whether you like it or not, to this point. I'm going to stay out so I can be really powerfully behind whoever the nominee is.
Let me ask you this, Will.
Obama's been pretty powerfully behind Joe Biden at this point, lining things up for him. We've seen it.
You were part of Obama world. You were there from the beginning. Something happened after Super Tuesday. The former president, MSNBC reported, made it clear that the signal has been met. The bat signal was sent, endorsed Joe. Dennis McDonough, Susan Powers, Samantha Powers, Susan Rice, all these people, endorsements started flowing.
We actually had an official meeting. We all got on the phone. No.
Well, what changed? I'm serious. What changed?
Email.
What changed within Obama world after Super Tuesday that said, let's go with Joe?
Well, I think a lot changed, right?
Yeah.
You had all these people drop out.
They won one state that everybody thought he was going to stay. He's going to.
Well, but it was if you think back to Obama world, and I've been saying this all since South Carolina, that was a pivotal state for him too. Yeah. Obviously he won Iowa, but when he won South Carolina, that signaled to everybody that hey, you can win. And the dominance of the win. I think we've all talked about that. How broad-based, and it was the same problem that Bernie had. If you can't fix your same problem with black people and broaden your base since you did 4 years ago, you're not going to do it. And I think that was a signal that was sent. This is our best shot. Let's get all our eggs in one basket. And there was not some chain email or call, but I think people just got that this is our best chance. This is
our only chance, basically. He was like the last man standing, and it was the last moment possible to really shift the trajectory of the race. And so they jumped all in. We have one more poll I want to put up, because on the one hand, some of the polls that came out yesterday, I was surprised that Bernie was as close to Joe as he was after all the consolidation, after all of Obama world throwing him for him having, all of that support lined up behind him, that those were so close. However, Florida, very different story. And this is a real problem for Bernie and Inez, because Florida is 2 weeks from, is not this Tuesday, but the Tuesday after. So it's coming soon, although there will have to be a debate before then, which Joe Biden one-on-one maybe doesn't go so well for him. So that's one thing. But this is a state that Bernie Sanders cannot afford to get blown out in. And right now, he is going to get blown out.
Right now, he's below the threshold.
To even get the delegates. And here's the thing. With a head-to-head matchup now, you have to at least keep things close, and you have to be winning. You cannot get blown out, especially in a state like Florida that has, I think, 228 delegates at stake.
Yeah.
So two things, right? Running by stereotypes that are nonetheless true, Florida is full of old people and Cubans.
Yeah.
Cubans, even younger Cubans who are shifting to the Democratic Party as opposed to the Republican Party, still remember in their family's living memory Fidel Castro.
Right.
So that's one.
Yep.
Two, Bernie doesn't do well with older folks. That's a consistent. Florida is like a perfect storm of bad indicators.
Bad demographics.
No, you're right. Yeah.
But I do want to make one point that's about the entire race, which is this with Joe Biden could not have happened in the Republican Party, even aside from the establishment being so much weaker and not having a constituency, because we had winner-take-all contests, right?
Right. Yeah.
So once that lead was built up in the early contests, it was really, really hard for anybody. Even if the Republican Party had consolidated down to Cruz or Rubio, it would have been a much, much tougher thing to rebuild.
Yeah. Right.
But this now sort of works in Bernie's favor, right? Which is to say that Joe Biden now has all the momentum, but that doesn't mean that Bernie's not going to pick up delegates. The problem for Bernie then at the end is he really needs to open up a large lead because at the convention, he's not going in with that advantage the same way that Joe Biden is in terms of superdelegates and in terms of the establishment actually being able to play. So I still think this looks bad for Bernie, but it doesn't look hopeless in the way that it would if this was winner-take-all contest.
It's not hopeless. The real thing is he has to count on two things. A, he needs to outperform his polls significantly. But B, he needs Biden to be Biden. He needs Biden to have a terrible debate. And, this is the main thing. Biden, I've said it here, he can't speak. And it's not a great thing whenever you have an actual 2-by-2 matchup. I think it's still out on whether Tulsi Gabbard's going to be on the stage or not. I don't think that's still good for Joe Biden.
That's worse for Joe Biden. If Tulsi's there.
If you have Tulsi and Bernie, Tulsi can bring fire that Bernie has never been able to have in his belly. Yeah, thank God. Please put Tulsi on that stage.
Just for pure entertainment's sake.
Yeah, truly. She would destroy him.
Yeah.
But that is the one thing. I think he needs to be in debate prep all the time. But I'm not sure how you can reverse the lack of being able to speak. He's always had bad
Well,
debates.
It's on a range, right?
Yeah.
He had his best debate that he had. It's on a curve, right? He's in law school, right? That's on a curve.
Yeah.
So I think he has the ability to do better than he has.
Yeah.
And like I said, he's been fired up. People have kind of accepted with Joe Biden that he makes these gaffes. I think that's baked into your Joe Biden opinion at this point. I don't think it's hurting him anymore.
But I question that because there's a reason why he did so poorly in the early states.
Right.
And it's because people saw him on that stage and were like, oh God, that guy's going to get destroyed by Donald Trump.
But
that's what happened.
You want to see him fight, and he's been fighting. You don't have to like how he's fighting. You don't have to like that he makes gaffes. People feel that. And I think, look, you're seeing him. I mean, Super Tuesday, the way he dominated, no one thought he was going to do that.
But he didn't dominate because of him. He dominated, because he has latent black support, no question, through Jim Clyburn and through his long affinity with the Obama years.
That's relevant. Let's unpack that. Why does he have that black support?
I understand
because there's a deep emotional connection to the person who he is,
right?
Which is independent of his policy agenda.
True.
And so I think that carries, and I think we're underestimating the power of that.
We did underestimate
when you see him go like, oh, blah, 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 oh, my wife Joe. People are like, oh, look at Joe, man. He's dang, I like that.
But here's the thing, though, Will. Here's the thing. I think
authentically a lost old boomer.
Yeah, septuagenarian.
Right. Which is benefiting him.
I actually think that if we're talking about authenticity, right, I think Elizabeth Warren was the least authentic, and I think it hurt
and it hurt her.
But
best.
I don't think we are.
I don't think we says malarkey.
Are talking about authenticity. I think we're talking about electability.
Yeah.
That's why everybody, when everybody lined up behind Joe and was like, that's the guy to beat Trump, everybody came over because it was the electability piece. And I think there was a temporary erasure of the poor performance and the weakness that was displayed, which is why he performed so poorly in those early states. So look, you're right. It is his race to lose at this point, but the establishment has also just put all of their eggs in the Joe Biden basket, and there's a reason why they didn't do that from the jump, because there are some problems there.
All right. Thank you, guys.
You guys are both great. Thank you.
See you.
Next week on Rising, more primaries. We're going to have the latest. We're paying close attention to Michigan. 5 other states are going to have primaries and caucuses, too.
And watch for our review of the week and Rising Cues this weekend. We're going to have Michael Strain, also author of The American Dream is Not Dead. Always remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any of our content. Have a fantastic weekend, guys. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.